So I have to start this video by stating that Catholicism has nothing to do with circumcision. There is nothing about having your son circumcised that is going to bring either him or you closer to God. I'll be going through that in minor detail, as well as the fact that I can't wrap my head around the fact that so many people would have the foreskins of their sons removed in a preventative fashion. Like the certain things that circumcision prevents. It's like saying, take your tonsils out, because then you'll never get tonsillitis. So I'll be going through a few different aspects of circumcision, what my view is on it, and what the church's stance would be on it as well today. In the Jewish custom, it was on the 8th day of a son's life that they would be taken to the temple in order to be circumcised. Now, in the Catholic faith, we no longer practice this. We have infant baptism, which I've done a video on. You can go check it out. It talks about spiritual food and how baptism opens that door for the Holy Spirit to come down. Christ himself was circumcised at 8 days old, which Mary and Joseph took him to the temple out of obedience. And then when he was 30, he went and got baptized and brought the Holy Spirit down. So by having an infant baptized, we are actually opening that door, that allowment for God's love to enter that child in a very unique way. An early church father, Tertullian, stated, "We do not follow the Jews in their peculiarities regarding to food, nor in their sacred days, nor even in their well-known bodily sign." And there are all other kinds of early church fathers that speak about how we do not need to be circumcised. Anyone who does is also going to be held to all of the rules that the Jewish tradition holds. In Romans 2 verse 9, we see that circumcision is no longer to be a fleshly removal, but rather a circumcision of the heart. That we are to circumcise ourselves from adultery and from all of the things that would serve as a barrier between us and God. So blood has always been a sign of the covenant. When we look in the Old Testament, we see the sacrificing of lambs and the fattest calf and all of these different pieces that play into how blood is so important. So when a young man was circumcised, it was that sacrifice. It was saying, here is something that we're offering. We're committing to raise our child in the church. But part of that too, women can't be circumcised in the same way that men can. That was actually one of the church fathers' quotes that states, "The inability of the female sex to receive fleshly circumcision proves that circumcision was given for a sign. It is not a work of righteousness," by Justin Martyr in 160 AD. Circumcision in and of itself is an outward sign. It's a sacrifice. And when Christ was baptized and sent everyone out to be baptized in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, that abolished circumcision. And so now we have the ability to not have to kill animals to gain God's favor or do any of these other pieces that play into our salvation. And then there's the medical aspect. So the biggest piece of circumcising an infant is the statement that it prevents UTIs. It helps reduce the risk that a son would contract a UTI. So with proper cleaning procedures and pulling the foreskin back and cleaning underneath it and all of these different pieces, anything that they say is less can still be prevented. The American Academy of Pediatrics states the possible benefits include a reduced risk in STIs or STDs and causing cervical cancer in other female sexual partners, a prevention of inflammation of the foreskin, and prevention of phimosis, which is the inability to retract the foreskin. So basically, by having your son circumcised, you're telling him, well, I wanted to make sure that if you choose to have multiple partners, you wouldn't contract an STI or give it to somebody else more frequently. It reduces the risk for HIV because of the type of cells that are within the foreskin. And then, like I said at the beginning of the video, it's like taking your tonsils out to prevent tonsillitis, or just removing the appendix, even though it's in totally fine working form, just to say, well, we're going to take this out just so that you don't get appendicitis down the road. In the 1970s, 1980s, it was approximately 8 out of 10 boys were circumcised at birth, and now the number is down to 5 or 6 out of 10. 1 in 3 men worldwide are circumcised. So it's really not, 33% worldwide is not really that high. However, the prevalence of circumcision is much higher in the United States. It's something closer to 75%. Choosing this for your son, however, just to acclimate to a cultural norm, or to say, well, I want my son to be like me, like a husband may say, or I want him to be like his friends, or anything of that nature. The Royal Dutch Medical Association in the Netherlands actually called for a law that would ban circumcisions in 2010 by saying that it is medically unnecessary and violates children's rights. There are risks to having your son circumcised. It causes pain, a certain type of pain that an infant cannot understand. The tip of the penis is also considered to be one of the most sensitive areas on a man's body, and the foreskin helps to protect that. So there is a risk of decreased sexual pleasure alongside that increased rubbing in the diaper when that baby is initially adjusting to this removal of a part of his body. Not to mention that there's an increased risk for infection temporarily. There is a risk. It's not even increased, because otherwise there wouldn't have been an incision there. But there's a risk for infection at the surgical site, and also a risk for an injury to the penis if it's done wrong. Basically, as parents, we are called to uphold the respect and dignity of our children. So if we have a son at any point, this baby could be a boy, it could be a girl. I'm sure we'll have some of both throughout our marriage. But if we have a son, it's our duty to protect and respect his bodily integrity. That's the number one thing that comes about with children. And ultimately, circumcision is what it is and needs to be called that, which is genital mutilation. I understand that there are medical benefits, and there is a certain level of that to look at, to consider, okay, my child is now 6 months old, he's had 3 UTIs, we should consider having him circumcised. It is now medically necessary because the foreskin isn't retracting, because of this is going on. It's no longer a preventative thing. This is why the AAP can't recommend it as a standard procedure. So I would just encourage you to do your research, think about it, consider what it is that you're choosing. Don't do it out of habit or because you think everybody else is doing it, because it's just not true. And it is your child. We are called to be set apart. And there is a level of the religious background that has just infiltrated into what our culture is today. The Judaic roots playing into that. And so just considering the fact that it is no longer religious whatsoever, it should only be considered as a medical necessity or prevention if that's what you choose. But in my personal opinion, if you're going to have the foreskin removed, you may as well have the tonsils and the appendix out as well. So that's my take. Hopefully this just gives you something to take away, think about, gnaw on a little bit, and consider how God might want you to approach this. Approach it prayerfully. Don't do it as a standard deal, and just see where God leads you with that. So God bless, take care, and until next time, we'll see you later, alligators.